Day, and the conversation continues. Now, a group of CEOs have come together to form a coalition to discuss the challenges that the regular Ghanaian is facing and, of course, the way forward. And we're going to have a further conversation on that because this coalition is being launched today at the Coconut Grove Hotel. So joining me this morning is the Executive Director of ACE, Benjamin Boakye, to tell us all about it. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm well.
All right. So tell us about this coalition and why there was a need for, all these CSOs to come together.
Yes, I think it's a group of civil society organizations that have been working on various strands of our governance spectrum and raising various issues at their own level. And think that we have gotten to the level where we have to come together to push the issues together.
Okay.
Because you raise one issue, the next month there's another, and you don't see traction on those that you raised earlier. And we have seen also that accountability is waning over time, and we need to get the government to listen and also engage much more accountably to ensure that we can shape the governance architecture and the development of our country together.
When you say you need the government to listen, I mean, does it require coalition? We have the individual CSOs who each have their voices, and they've been hammering on all these challenges and the way forward for government, the decisions that they need to take in order to fix the economic challenges. But that seems to have fallen on deaf ears. And you think that coming together makes a difference?
I think we are exploring strategies.
Okay.
We have been working in our own individual organizations, as I mentioned, and we are not getting the results. So the group thought that we could now come together to see how we can pool the issues together to push them much more aggressively. And most importantly, also to engage the citizens so that we appreciate where civil society is coming from, where public faces in our community are coming from, so that together we can contribute to fixing our problems and ensuring that, government remains accountable to the people. If you check our governance architecture, recently, some of our groups have been researching and looking at the data. And you realize that on public expenditure, about 93% of the value that we spent don't go through proper procurement or competitive tendering. Sole sourcing has become the order of the day, even though the promise was to move away, create competition, and ensure that there is value for the expenditure of public funds. But increasingly, we are seeing secrecy and opacity in the governance, and we think that if we're able to come together, some of the issues that we have been prompting at our individual level, we can give it much more power and get the authorities to listen. And some of our members have even complained that when you go solo and try to engage, you don't even get a response, right? So we are exploring how together we can work with citizens to push for good governance.
The fact that you raised the issue of sole sourcing, and again, government will tell you that we haven't been in normal times in the last 2 years. And so there's been a need to make some very rash decisions in order to save the economy. And one of those decisions will even be the fact that we had Frontiers Healthcare man the testing situation at the airport. And even that's the health minister said he wasn't thinking right, but we're also not in normal times. So there was a need to quickly put someone there to start the testing. So they'll give those excuses over time that we either haven't been, in normal times, and that's why we've had to make that decision. How do you handle such a situation?
I think we've been tracking the process over time, and it just didn't start with COVID. It's been there from, some time back. You remember in the speech of the president in 2018, State of the Nation, he gave progress on procurement and said they had reduced sole sourcing by 20%. We never had a mention of that again because it can't be sustained, right? So it tells you how that process has degenerated over time. And we need to get back on course and on track to ensure that we have a robust procurement system. We can reduce the corruption, get institutions functioning. And to the credit of the government, we've seen some institutions established, but essentially non-functional. And we don't want a situation where we are happy to pay people to sit in institutions and not function. All right, we need to get to the bottom of that and push for proper accountability for the expenditure of public funds.
We're going to the IMF, even at a time when constantly we had government officials insist that we had the capacity to run our own economy and fix our own problems. And so there was no need for us to go back to the IMF. Now, just last Friday it was announced officially that the president had asked the finance ministers to commence negotiations with the IMF. We're told they'll get into town on Wednesday for that. Even TUC has described it as a tragic mistake going back to the IMF. We've had quite a number of people who have said that it either came a little too late or maybe we shouldn't have gone at all because it doesn't really address the structural problems that we have in the country. What do you say?
No, I think the issues that are taking us to the IMF are the very problems that some of our members have been complaining about for some time now, urging government to address those specific issues. And they fell on dead ears, right? And that's why we are having to go to IMF. So part of the conversation really is, how do we even go to IMF? It's just a wish to get there, but there are some requirements we have to meet to be able to assess the IMF program. And we will want to be part of that process to ensure that it's not just going to IMF, only hoping to go back the next 3 years, but we can have a much more robust program that also insulates the poor from harsher decisions or actions, and also target those growth areas that can contribute to the development of our country. So we are going, but we have to ensure that we are able to get there, and what should get into a program that actually prevents Ghana from future IMF programs.
Should we even be going in the first place? Like you said, what we need to do to prevent us from going back to the IMF. But this has been like a cycle. So we go after 3 years, we sort of stabilize the economy, and then when we part ways with IMF, we go back into the doldrums again. Should we be going back, or should we rather do some introspection and fix whatever the problem is from the roots?
No, you can't. We have to fix the problem ourselves, and essentially that's what IMF will be telling you to do. So when you go to the IMF, and it gets surprising why sometimes we seem not to know what the IMF does. They're only going to tell you what you should have done and you didn't do, and ask you to do them now. All right. So I think at every stage, every country has to assess its economy, look at what it can do, what the private sector has to do, so that you don't have government trying to do everything, and in the name of procurement, spend more than they can actually mobilize, to end ourselves into a situation where we always need an advice from the IMF. And I hear people complain that when you go to the IMF, you're going to meet small boys telling you what to do. But the template is there. You don't need to be 60 years, 70 years to know, what the right things are to do. So we need to, on our own, build that robust governance mechanism. I mean, you check some of the institutions, for example, we look at GMPC, BOST. The employment rate has grown over sometimes 400-500%, doing the same thing. You don't need the IMF to tell you that you are, unnecessarily employing people or increasing the numbers for no effective output. So those are things we have to be doing ourselves. Unfortunately, we haven't been doing them. So you need a small boy to tell you what to do. So what we have to understand is that it's so embarrassing, and we have to get a point where we can take our own hard decisions, build an economy that is run by the private sector, employing people. People are being trained to be creative, generate employment, so that the burden is not just on government.
But
and
that's the thing.
Increasingly, that is what government, we want to employ people, as if government is the one. Elsewhere, people don't even want to get into government employment because you can be paid better.
They did mention that they were going to engage the private sector to employ more people.
Yeah, but we haven't. I mean, they have been taxing the private sector to death, right? And they still think that model will work. Even now, we are taxing the very poor, the very businesses that are struggling. All right. So we have to model that economy such that we can help the poor ones to grow, the smaller businesses to grow, to be bigger and contribute to development. And also import substitution has to be taken seriously and aggressively. We've been spending so much in the agri sector, to grow what we eat, and we are not growing them. And you ask us, where has the money gone to? So these are the issues that we have to, into the future, pay attention to, get citizens to be involved so that we track it. And not come back to the same situation again.
As we're going to IMF, do you think e-levy should be scrapped? Because we're told that it's either we pass the e-levy or we go to the IMF. Now,
no,
just recently,
the e-levy, we told
much.
Government was not going to work from the start, all right? And they didn't listen. And it's part of the reason why we wake up one day only to realize that we're getting 10%. It was always the point. If you're trying to tax the poor, they have more energy to resist. And it is a pure economic fact. All right. So you rather want to help the poor to grow, to become big and contribute to tax. If you check our GDP, 60%, 71% actually, come from the formal sector. So what that clearly tells you is that the leakages are the formal sector. So trying to spend more money to target the 30% or the poor bracket, you're not going to get revenue from there. And it was clear by looking at the data, which government refused to look at. And that's the result they're getting.
Should they scrap it now?
I think it has to go to allow that space to also grow. Financial inclusion and get people to get into the digital space, be able to move cash within the economy for growth. Now you're getting everybody to think how to evade that tax. It's time wasting. You're wasting everybody's time. And we are not even quantifying the effect on the economy, how transactions are getting slow within the economy because everybody is trying to evade e-levy. I think we have to remodel it.
But it was predicted. I remember that the Deputy Finance Minister, John Kumar, had mentioned that prior to us passing the e-levy, there had been a study conducted that indicated that the first 3 months was going to be challenging. There was going to be a significant drop in Momo, usage. And after that, it was going to rise by some percentage as well. Are we not speaking a little too early and jumping the gun when we've just done about a month, or so into e-levy?
No, I mean, the fact really even is that people are still exploring how to evade it. So it's going to get worse.
Okay.
All right. So the earlier they think about it, so that you don't kill that financial space, the better. Because people are going to be much more resistant, trying to look at ways to actually evade that tax. And for me, that Momo space actually gives you an overview of how your economy is running, who is transacting what. And that gives you data. And we told the finance ministry this, that if you want to know who is transacting most in your economy, that space gives you the data for you to model your tax policies and the rest of it. If you kill it, then where are you going to know how I'm making my money, how I'm transacting in the digital space? Because now you're pushing me to cash transaction. So how much I even make, you can't even track it. All right, so you need data to be able to map out individuals that should be paying tax, businesses that are running in your space and the rest of it. Don't kill that space. And we keep hammering that and insisting that we have to be much more robust, targeting those that are making big money and contributes bigger to the GDP. And it's easier than trying to get the masses that are not contributing much to the GDP.
I see. But at the same time, road tolls, we've stopped collecting them since December last year. We're told that we could have raised about some 78 million annually from road tolls. Up until this point, we should have been able to raise at least half of that. That could have augmented whatever we collected from e-levy to fix one problem or the other. Should that come back? Because there are people who have lost their jobs, who were told they'll be reassigned. And many of them have said that we have not received any message from government indicating that we have been reassigned. We have still not been paid those monies that we were owed, because we're told we'll be paid while we're home until we are reassigned. None of that has happened.
No, I think that was one of the knee-jerk policies. And if you don't test policy to check its robustness, these are some of the problems you have. So revenues that could have come into the basket, all of a sudden, you don't have it. And what you thought you could get with e-levy was brought down by this controversy and parliament issues. You couldn't raise the money. And now I'm sure government will be thinking, should we go back to it or not? I think they should go back.
They should go back to
the
collecting
road
road tolls?
Absolutely, because you need to have a sustainable way of maintaining your roads and building new roads. And the road users must contribute to building the roads. All right. Unfortunately, we haven't done well using the revenues to build the roads and maintain them.
We
and maybe
we weren't even generous enough.
Well, those parameters can also be examined.
Okay.
How much are you collecting? Can you up it? And if you up it, what is the assurance you are giving to the road user that his condition will improve? I don't want to pay toll and stay on the motorway for hours and burn fuel. If you can assure me that by paying more, I can cut my travel time and be able to save more on fuel, then you are making economic sense to the one who is paying the toll. So we have to really model it and get people to engage around the issue. For example, if you are traveling 6 hours to Kumasi and the traveler can be assured that this is a 2.5-hour journey, we will build a road and toll it, and you cut your fuel by 50% by not wasting it on the road. people understand. But it's because they collect the toll and we don't see the results. That's why the resistance is high.
But even fuel and its challenges as well. I mean, we've been talking about cutting down some of the taxes that contribute to the high number. At least recently, we've seen some 7 to 8% decrease in petrol prices. We're told that diesel has actually gone up by some 3%. But even that, the Concerned Drivers Association, even the NPA had mentioned that they had asked government to look at some of these taxes that should be taken off. Government says if we take away those taxes, then we'll not be able to, for example, the price stabilization levy, we will not be able to subsidize premixed fuel in the country. And some of these other taxes as well will cost us some 4 billion Ghana cedis. We cannot do that. What do you say?
I think that is an area that we need to have a big conversation and be honest about the impact of petrol on the entire economy. I mean, in Ghana, it's a must. You must have a car. It's not, you don't have a choice. It's not a luxury because you don't have public transportation that is efficient and robust to bring you to work. So you need a car, you need to drive, you need to buy fuel. So as the product price increases, the burden on the consumer is really, really high, and the effect on the broader economy is unimaginable. In many parts of the world, people, transport options are there. Even if you want to use your car, you're not likely to be in such a huge or thick traffic to waste your fuel. So our situation is quite peculiar and requires that government to act. We have looked at the data and the numbers, and have realized that government could do more to ensure that we are injecting relief into the economy. We are an oil exporter, and if you look at the windfall that we are getting from upstream oil exports, we are making far more than what we are seeking to collect from downstream sector. I mean, when we did our analysis, just benchmarking around $90 per barrel, we're looking at government getting about $470 million. The whole projection for 2022 is about 2.5 billion for the special petroleum tax, which means that you are getting more than what you're programming to get on special petroleum tax. So you could actually waive that and use the windfall that you are making to be able to pass on relief to the consumer. We've also indicated that there are a lot of waste along the value chain. The UPPF could be remodeled and make it much more competitive. You go there, the procurement is bizarre. It's politicians who are doing the tracking around. So the value that we are getting from that is really not good for us. We can actually remodel that to cut the waste. The premise, I mean, you tell us that you are collecting levies so that when prices are escalating, you'll be able to smoothen it and bring down the burden. You have collected the revenue for 6 years, and you couldn't give us any substantial rebate on products when the prices were increasing. What that means is that the credibility of the policy is gone. All right, so you're better off scrapping it. All right, premix, I mean, we have seen how the data, the consumption is growing, and you go to the fishing community, they don't even get the product. So people are lifting that and making money, using the subsidy. And the corruption in that space is unimaginable, that we are only subsidizing people's pocket. We need to review that policy and ensure that the product can be priced at least at the import level. If you're not even applying taxes on the premix, that is fine. But to further subsidize the product only for politicians to milk it, it's not in our interest. Anyway,
well, I would have wished that we had enough time to discuss further these issues. But of course, the Coalition for Democratic Accountability and Inclusive Governance, Citizens Coalition, that is what is being launched today.
Yeah, and we're inviting you. Everybody should be part of it. We want citizens to now speak truth to power, shape the governance architecture, extract accountability from them. I was sad to check the IMF data to show that COVID expenditures in many countries, Ghana was red to the extent that we were not transparent with the way we spent our money on COVID. And that is across the board. We have to fix that. We want every citizen to be part of this movement. We definitely have to fix it. So it's being launched today at the Coconut Grove Hotel, Accra. But there's also a YouTube link that you can join and be part of it. And so all those details, of course, are out there. You should be part of this press conference. We'll be there. Definitely to support. Thank you so much. Benjamin Boachi is Executive Director for ASEP. And when